They say that unforgiveness is toxic. It's like drinking poison yourself and expecting the other person to die, when really the only person who gets sick is you. Growing up on an estate in East London, I saw the effects of youth violence firsthand, and I learned that you don't ever really get even. Only forgiveness can break the cycle. This week, Josh and I are exploring the power of forgiveness. My name's Guvna B. I'm a rapper, author, and broadcaster. I'm also a Christian. Many people think that Christianity is boring, untrue, and irrelevant. But I'm going on a journey around the UK to discover whether there are stories where the church, Christianity, and faith are making a difference in people's lives. I'm taking my mate Josh, and we're planning to have a lot of fun on the way. As we ask, is God dead? I'm heading into Wormwood Scrubs, a prison in West London, to meet one of the chaplains, Gav Cutler. I was actually going to start by asking you to tell me a little bit about your upbringing, but I'm more interested in these Jordans.
Oh, come on. It's all about the sneaker action.
Tell us a little bit about these.
Tell them about these.
These are sick, man.
You like these?
Yeah, man.
They're something special, aren't they?
But yeah, man, just tell me a little bit about what it was like
growing up. My story is there was a couple of attempted abductions growing up. The first one that came about was I was standing on my drive and I saw two guys walking up the road in this little village, and they stopped and they pulled out a big knife, and I just freaked, as you would. I can't remember how old I was, maybe about 9. And that was it for me. I just went straight into fear mode.
You know, when you were facing a lot of fear, what kind of impacts did your mum and dad have on you at that time?
During that time, they got me help with the trauma of the attempted abductions, for sure. However, I don't remember when I transitioned out of that fear mode into being a confident guy. But yeah, they loved me through it, for sure.
Was there anyone else around that had an impact on you at that time?
Yeah, for sure. So maybe fast forward a couple of years to about 12 years old. We had a distant family relative who we rarely saw. He came and moved to the village. From that, I'm sad to say, he abused me. When you've been abused, and I'm proud to say that I'm a survivor of abuse now, you feel it's your fault, and I couldn't stop him from doing it. So because I was carrying that, I was too scared to tell my mum and my dad, and so it went unnoticed.
If I put myself in your position, think about some of the stuff that you've been through, it would be really hard to move forward. And you found out that he'd come clean at 18 years old, but so much stuff had happened to you before that.
Of course.
Where did you go from there as an 18-year-old man with all this trauma?
Yeah, so not to a good place, if I'm honest with you. So I left school when I was 16, got a really good opportunity to go and work for a top supermarket at their head office at 16 years old. And because I was in that environment of corporate world, city boy, wearing a suit, thinking I was now the big man, I got involved in drinking to start, and then that just progressed to smoking, marijuana, ecstasy, and then to the point where it was cocaine. And that was my go-to, I suppose, to deal with all that trauma. That continued for 12 years, so from 18 to the point where up to 30. And when I got to my 30th birthday was coming up, I knew that I needed to do something, otherwise I was going to end up spending a bit of time probably in a prison, or dying from a drug overdose. So I got involved in a recovery program called the 12-step recovery program, which enables addicts to get sober from the disease of addiction. And that's what I learned about attending that 12-step program, is that it's a disease. Diseases can be treated, right? So that 12-step enabled me to learn about the disease, how to stop using, and there was a load of things put in place to help me with that. Through doing that program, you had to believe in a higher power. So that higher power could be Jesus, it could be God, it could be of another faith.
West Ham United.
Could be West Ham United, yeah. You know, it could be like some famous rapper if you wanted it to be. As long as it got you sober and you had someone to go with, that's who it could be. So every day, my sponsor said to me, he gave me a few things to do. To write a gratitude list, 10 things that I'm grateful for. To attend at least 3 recovery meetings a week. And to get on my knees every morning and every evening, asking God to keep me sober and then thanking me for keeping me sober. And I did it for a week, but it just felt like I was talking to myself. It just felt like God's not real at the end of the day. Was where I was at. And I spoke to my sponsor at the end of the week. I said, I'm doing all the things. I said, but the prayer thing is just not working for me. To which he said, have you done drugs this week? And I was like, no. He's like, you must be doing something. Wow. And that was it for me. I was like, I'd better not drop it. I better continue doing it. So for a year, I went through this program, and there was relapse in there as well. It was like, I quit on that day and it was good. There was relapse in my recovery. And I did it for a year and I got sober.
Because like, we can't change the past, but we can change what life looks like
today,
in the future,
of course.
Today, which is incredible. Talk to me a little bit about forgiveness, how you've managed to forgive yourself, forgive the people early on in your life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, so like I said to you, when I told my family I was this drug addict, what I was expecting was to be cast out, thrown out, everything to fall apart and to be abandoned. And I just received love. And I wasn't able to receive that love because that wasn't the reaction I was expecting. Through going through a 12-step recovery program, I got to learn to forgive myself. And once I was able to forgive myself, I could then start to accept the forgiveness that was on offer when I first came out about it. Through going through Alpha, through walking with other Christians, I've got to learn that forgiveness is a gift from God, but it's a gift that we give to others. And ultimately, with forgiveness, if you don't forgive, the only person you're really hurting is yourself. Now, I've had the opportunity to speak in prisons, in chapels, and talk on that subject. And I've had guys come up to me in tears saying, do you honestly forgive that person? And I'm like, yeah, I do. Wow. Do you think I could be forgiven? I'm like, let's pray about it now.
Talk to us a little bit about what you're doing now. So you got the dog collar on?
Got the dog collar, yeah. So it's quite a funny story actually, because to go back to about 22, 23, I actually applied to be a prison officer, which is a terrible career choice for a drug addict, actually. So I don't know what I thought I was doing, but I applied to be a prison officer, and I was successful, and they posted me at the prison that my abuser was actually serving their sentence, and that was it for me. Like, that was the end of that, that pursuing of that career choice. So now, as an ordained minister within the Church of England, I'm able to use my brokenness, use my trauma, use my stories, and my story of redemption and hope to the guys in prisons, the youngsters in the young offenders prisons, to show them that there's a different path that they can take. They don't need to go down those roads. There is a hope and a new life in Jesus. And that's the gift I can give back to my family. You ask about reconciliation. That story of hurt is now a story of hope for others, and that's how I try and pay it back.
Amazing. And just before we finish, give me your trainers.
Yeah, good luck. Bro, it's been
bro.
good.
Amazing story.
Yeah,
man.
bless you, mate.
Thank you for speaking to me.
No,
man.
thanks for coming in. It's been good to have you.
It's been amazing hearing how Gav is now helping other people to experience the power of forgiveness. I'm off to Peckham to meet an old friend of mine, Ben Lindsay, and I'm picking Josh up on the way. Ben runs an organisation called Power the Fight, who aim to tackle youth violence in London.
Boys, what's the deal with you guys? How did you guys meet?
Right, it's a long story.
I feel like we met at a festival called New Day, and Ben was there running a venue called the River Factory, which was sick basically. Hip hop, grime music, garage, dance hall. It was like being in the ends, and it was sick.
and Ben got me to perform at it. And I think I started coming back every year, and we built up a good friendship.
I was walking through Lewisham High Street and I saw this massive poster of Guvna B, and I was like, who is this guy? I've not heard of this guy. So at the time we were looking for people for this festival. So I was like, we're gonna go up and just see what this guy's like, because he looks like he's got a lot about him from the poster, but until you actually see him, you don't know. And we got there, and I was just like, oh my goodness, I've never seen anything like it. He was doing Kingdom Skank, and the crowd was just going mad, and I couldn't work it out. I was like, this is crazy, but I said, this is the guy. Let's get him. Let's see if we can bring him to New Day. When you see a young people in general, the first thing you want is to make sure that they do flourish, they do grow, they do achieve everything they can do. And I just saw that in Isaac. I thought there's something very special here. So yeah, it was a pleasure, and it is a pleasure just to walk alongside him.
But what are you up to now? We spoke about it a little bit on the way over here, but tell us about Power the Fight.
Yeah, so I'm CEO of a charity called Power the Fight. We empower communities to end youth violence. It was set up in 2019, but the idea came in 2016, where unfortunately we lost 2 young people to youth violence, to knife crime, in South East London. One young man called Marvin Yard, and I knew Marvin's family since like 2000, 2001, so known Marvin since he was 1 year old, really. So for me, I was like, how do we empower the community to be part of the solution? So what do? We do 4 things. We train and equip anybody who's front facing with the issue of youth violence. So in the last 2 years, we've trained over 12,000 practitioners. We also got podcasts called Power Talks, where we interview some of the best practitioners, innovators across the country. We also give money to families who have been impacted by this issue. So we've given over £13,000 to 26 families in the last 2 years. And we've also developed this therapeutic service called TIP, Therapeutic Intervention for Peace, which works with young people, practitioners, and parents and carers who have been impacted by trauma. I'm a guy who just wants to see peace. And I think it's because I've seen how much, when it comes to violence, it's not just what happens in the instance, it's the ripple effects which impact the communities for years.
Just piggybacking off the thing about the ripple effect, we was at this festival, 7,000 kids, and one evening on Snapchat, the murder of a young person from South East London, sent to some of his friends at the camp, sent on to hundreds of others at that camp, and I've never seen anything like it.
So that young man which Isaac was talking about was Myron's best friend. He did the eulogy at Myron's funeral. And then in that time, so Myron died in April, and then by August, he was murdered.
I'm sure it's probably a painful experience, like the emotions that come talking about him, but would you just share your experience in that story?
Yeah, so I was actually out of London at the time. So I was in Shrewsbury on holiday. And it was a bit of a funny one because my wife is always like, when we're on holiday, do not answer your phone. So his text came through from Myron's, we'll call him his stepdad, and was like, you need to call me. So I was like, no. And then it was like, I know you really need to call me. So when I phoned him, it was like, just straight up, Myron's dead. He's been stabbed. And so I was like, what? I couldn't get my head around it. It was just kind of, you know when you hear words, but they don't resonate, they don't hit. It was just a really horrible time because you suddenly started seeing family members being impacted, but you start seeing young people being impacted. You saw the wider community being impacted. And Myron was such a well-loved young person. But yeah, it was horrible. It was probably one of the most painful experiences I've had because I knew him and I know the family very well.
How do you look at forgiveness as a Christian, as a pastor, as the CEO of a charity?
From a Christian perspective, forgiveness is at the heart of the faith. It's the cornerstone. How that plays out on a day-to-day, where you've got people who maybe are not Christians, and also where there's real life beef, I think is really interesting. So number one, I think you've got to model it. You know, so every day I'm trying to model what does reconciliation look like. I think it's also about the position that you choose to play. Are you going to be the person who can actually stand in the middle of people and be that peacemaker? Blessed are the peacemakers, you know. Are you going to be that person? And that's not an easy place to sit at all. But I think if God's given you grace to do that, then that's where you're meant to be.
So I think what Ben does, which is unique, is not only, you know, stand up side by side with the other organisations in this area, but also challenge and equip Christians and empower them to do more in this area, which I don't think a lot of people do.
For someone like me who hasn't necessarily seen it as blatantly as some of us might have done, what's the call to action for me, who obviously now sees the issue? I see the issue, I know it's there, I obviously believe that the action is needed. What's the action for me now?
So for me, I think it's financial support to organisations like Power to Fight, and there's plenty out there. I think put yourself in a position in a posture of learning, engaging with the community. I'd also say, but there's some basic things like talk to young people. It's like all these little things. A friend of mine who's a white middle class woman recently said to me, I was walking past a load of black kids and I just smiled. And she said she heard them say, oh, did you see that white girl? She just smiled at us. We don't ever see that. Why was she smiling? And being a little bit kind of like suspicious. But actually, it's little things you can do on a regular basis which just breaks down these barriers which the community unfortunately have put up. So yes, we can do all the right to MP, you can put money into things, you can, you know, support organisations, but there's also some just everyday things. And I think a lot of it comes down to loving thy neighbour. What does that actually mean? You know, who is your neighbour? You know, who is my neighbour, as it says in scripture. But there's been some moments recently, and just talking to Chantel, Myron's older sister, just to see how she is in this position of forgiveness is just powerful. It's that type of conversation when you're just like, oh my goodness, I don't know how that plays out, but it's the power of God. So,
and just finally, obviously in inner city communities, there's fractured relationships with police. Now you're working with the feds.
I am not working with the feds. To be very
now
clear.
you're an undercover agent. How do people?
I'm just trying to get me shut down or shut up. One of the two, whatever comes first.
Josh is on his way to meet Chantel Gray, who Ben is introducing him to, so they can hear her story.
So when you were growing up, you lived with your family?
Yeah, it's my mum and 5 brothers and sisters, so I'm the oldest.
Oh really? Nice. How many brothers and sisters? Like, what are the boys and girls?
3 boys and 3 girls.
Oh nice. I'm the youngest of 3.
Oh.
I've got 2 older sisters, and I think they'd probably both say that they mother me as well. So I'm aware. Did you get on with your brothers and sisters growing up?
Well, they had no choice to get on with me because, we used to do some silly things.
I'd love to talk about one of your brothers, Myron. What was he like growing up?
Oh gosh. Well, he was a bit of a surprise. when my mum told me that she was having him, I was a bit like, oh, I'm 19, I should be having a child, not you. I ended up naming him. That was what I was going to name my son, Myron. And then from then we was inseparable. Like, he was like my little son. I used to take him everywhere with me, buy him clothes, everything. So yeah, and he was just a sweet little son. He was just always funny, and was just such a humble, loving little boy when he was younger, and still when he got older as well.
Was he the youngest?
Yes, yes.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So Myron was this young guy who was full of talent, doing what he loved. And tell us, if you can, just, you know, where are we at now with Myron?
Well, in 2016, Myron was unfortunately murdered. Got a knock on the door. Well, not a knock, it was banging, that he'd been stabbed. And rushed around there. It wasn't far from where I lived. I couldn't see him, it was all taped off. And yeah, I just kind of knew, I was just praying that he'd be okay, but I just kind of knew that, I just had a feeling he wasn't, even though I couldn't see it. And we got to the hospital and they kept us in a room, and then the doctor came, and I just knew that the doctor was going to say he had passed. It was a 10-week trial, and I laughed, I cried, and we managed to get a verdict, and they got done for manslaughter. But, you know, at the same time, being there and hearing everything, there's still 3 young black boys who are now facing prison, and, you know, it easily could have been the flip side of Myron could have been in that situation.
Yeah.
You kind of feel like you're a victim of, let's say you are a victim of what's happened, this crime. But then I don't want what's happened to now define me. And sometimes when you don't forgive, or you carry that in you, it's in your body, it's in your mind, you can't move on with your life. It affects your relationships with other people because you've still got this anger and hurt and pain inside of you. So the only way I could get through it is for forgiveness.
It's amazing to hear that you are able to forgive the people who have killed your brother. What does forgiving them look like in your life? Like, how do you go about forgiving someone like that?
It's not an easy thing, and I don't think not every situation or not everyone can do it. You know, it's a personal thing. But for me, it's because I was at the court case, seeing them, they're so young, and it's just like, I kind of just put myself in other people's shoes, and like, how would I feel if this was me, if I was in their situation, and would I want someone to forgive me?
It's amazing. You're an amazing example to your daughter and to everyone. It's so difficult to speak about it, but thank you for speaking and for being willing to forgive. What an unbelievable model and example you are to, like I said, to your daughter and to us. What a witness. Am I right? It's amazing. Thank you so much.
It's okay. Thank you.
I don't know how you move past that, but she seems to be keen on turning it for good, hey?
I think that it can only be a work of the Lord. Because I just think it's like, you know, there's some things that I can't see how that's possible without faith, or without because it's just not humanly possible. It's not a human process, is it? It's not like a human reaction.
No.
More amazing that God has turned it into a story of reconciliation and forgiveness than what it could have ended up being, just anger and That is, I mean, obviously there's all those things.
Yeah. Amazing woman.
She was.
Forgiveness is right at the heart of the Christian faith. That we are completely forgiven, and out of the knowledge of our own forgiveness, God gives us the strength to forgive others. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation, but it does have the power to set us free. Hearing stories like those of Gav and Chantel makes me realize again and again just how powerful God's love is and the difference it can make in our lives. That God can take some of the most painful things in our lives, heal us, and use them for His glory.